Welcome to the Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom webinar. I'm Maggie Montemuro, and I'm the Marketing Manager at Savvy Ladies. If you have a question during the webinar, please type it into the chat box. And if you're joining us by phone, email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Today's presenter is Lois M. Brenner, renowned New York divorce attorney, accredited divorce mediator, and psychologically trained medical professional. Lois has a unique approach that addresses both the head and the heart in the divorce process. She previously served as CEO of a successful corporation before starting her legal career as a corporate attorney with Sullivan & Cromwell, and she was head of the matrimonial department of Hertzfeld & Rubin before opening her own practice. Lois is the author of Getting Your Share, A Woman's Guide to Successful Divorce Strategies, which has been featured on Oprah. She has written for and been quoted by the New York Times and New York Magazine. She has appeared as a family law expert on The Oprah Winfrey Show, Good Morning America, and CNN. Lois's new book, The Psychology of Divorce, is launching in spring 2017. Thanks for being with us, Lois, and I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Lois Brenner, and I'm going to talk to you about the psychology of divorce, about which I am writing a book. So, as you heard, I'm a medical professional as well as a divorce lawyer, and I do something that's different, trying to keep people out of court. For some reason, everybody thinks they have to hire a lawyer and fight, but that's not true, and I'm going to tell you all about how to not do that. You've probably heard that getting a divorce is a nightmare, and that's because people think that they have to fight. It's expensive, it's adversarial. Lawyers tend to encourage this, and not everybody knows about mediation and using psychology. So that's why it's a nightmare. And here's an example. For instance, your spouse does you wrong. He picks up with an old girlfriend, and you find out about it, and you are angry, and you're furious, and you want to get revenge. This is the knee-jerk typical response of somebody who has been hurt. And here's what people do. They take money out of joint accounts without telling the other person. They cancel the other person's credit cards. They cancel cell phone plans. They don't pay the household bills. And if they can, they prevent the other spouse from seeing the children. This behavior is what gets people into trouble and into court. So, because someone wants to see their kids, and if the only way they can do it is to get an order from a judge, that's what they need to do. Or they need to get their bills paid. Same thing, you're forcing them to go to court. So here's some advice about how to not have that happen. So as a family law attorney, I've spent 35 years going to court in the traditional system. But for the last few years, I have married the legal and medical skills to develop a new alternative. And it's a highly civilized and successful approach to divorce. And the process includes mediation. What is mediation? It's the couple meeting with one person who is not biased and not representing either one of them. And this person's job is to facilitate conversation and negotiation between the couple so that they can come to an agreement on all of the issues they have to solve, such as what do they do with their property, how much child support, how much spousal support, how do you spend the time with your children. Um, this is what we discuss in a mediation session. And there are some rules to that which keep it moving, such as we're not talking about the past, we're not insulting each other, and we are going to listen to what the other person has to say without saying yes, but. So this process is clearly less adversarial, it's less expensive, and less time consuming than the traditional system of going to court. Um, it encourages negotiations, and it usually offers the best results because nobody's telling the people what they have to do. They're making their own decisions. So the other method is the nightmare, where both parties hire an attorney and each pays an initial retainer. Sometimes it's $10,000, sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's more, and off they go to the races. They are starting to make applications to a court for various things, for temporary support, for exclusive occupancy of a residence, for time with the children, and the more this goes on, the more people hate each other and the more money they spend. I mean, you can spend 10 times as much money negotiating or going to court as you would in mediation. So everybody gets angrier and angrier, and essentially they spend the parties' money on lawyers, and it's not there for them. This is our traditional system, and this is what we're trying to change. Mediation is a private situation with the mediator and the couple. Um, Usually people only need a few meetings. There's one neutral person, which is me when we're negotiating, who facilitates the negotiations. And, you know, there are little tricks to this. You're not allowed to talk about the past. You only can talk about what you want for the future. The retainer fees are much smaller because there's less time spent, and the clients are getting direction and support as they talk to each other. And I also bring in, as needed, you know, therapists, financial advisors for people to figure out what to do with the money and how to divide it. If necessary, private investigators and forensic accountants to see what's going on, to enable people to move forward and make good decisions. It takes into consideration what really happens, which is people have feelings. They're hurt, they're angry, they're scared. And then they think, oh my God, I need to do something to change this. And then they act out. So that's when they close the accounts, that's when they change the locks, that's when they stop paying bills. And here we are in behavior. And typically I can come in right here before it happens and say, don't do that. It's really not a good idea. And that's just going to make you have to go to court. And you can get the same result in mediation as you would after paying a fortune in court. And so it helps them negotiate in a different setting. I look at the personality traits of the individuals. I see if we're dealing with a narcissist or a sociopath or an abusive person. And this lets me know how to handle the couple so that they can, in fact, have some creative problem solving and they get positive results. So in a sense, psychology is almost more important than the law, because with the law, it's fairly standard how much child support you're going to get, how much spousal support, under what circumstances. It's usually in the statute, and how property is going to be divided. So I try to encourage um, the parties listening to each other so that they feel heard. And we're negotiating issues like child support, visitation, spousal support. Um, and what we're working to develop is essentially what's called a separation agreement that satisfies the needs of both parties. Each of them may make some concessions, but they usually come up with an agreement. And it's kind of creative problem solving. So I can do a lot to help them in this process. Just to give you some examples, I handled a case in which the husband was a building contractor, the wife was a teacher. They had a 10-year-old daughter. They were living in a house in a development that he was building, and the house wasn't finished yet, but they were living there without heating, and the roof wasn't up yet. And the wife found out that her husband was using cocaine and having an affair with the babysitter. And when she told him that, and that she really didn't want to stay married, he stormed out of the house, and he left them in a roofless home without heating, under construction. And the next day, when she went to take their daughter to school, she discovered that he had siphoned the gas from her car. People do amazing things. So, we clearly, he was a sociopath. He would say one thing, but he would do something else. He didn't think the rules applied to him, and a narcissist, very self-centered, and, probably a drug addict. And, we felt that she was at some risk, so we had to go to court. This was not going to be mediated. A forensic accountant evaluated the business, and it was worth a lot more than he said. They discovered how he used the cash. And ultimately, when it was over, the wife received child support, sole custody, um, a high financial settlement for her share of the business, support for herself until she was working, and the court ordered him to complete construction on the marital residence. So that's just one example. Another one, which is really quite striking, is a couple where the husband owned several franchises in the same area, and the wife worked with him. They had 2 children, and he had a girlfriend, and when the wife confronted him, he came over and broke her finger and threatened to do more. And again, we had to hire a private investigator, have the business evaluated, find out what he had in his bank accounts, how much he was really earning, look at his computers, look at his emails, text messages. And again, here we're dealing with a sociopath and an abusive person, and you really can't negotiate with these people. You just have to do what you need to do, and convince a judge and get your results. Ultimately, the wife got half the value of the business and the pension, child support and sole custody. She got the house, spousal support until she could work. And, the real twist to this one was that she was about to get her divorce, and on Christmas Day, the husband was missing, and he was found in the driver's seat of his car, and somebody had put a bullet in his head, and he was no longer. And she became a very rich widow, and I wasn't sure what to say to her, congratulations, or sorry your kids lost their father, but this is this is what happens when people are unreasonable. And in another instance, just to give you another example, uh, the wife got her paycheck and it was not what it was supposed to be. And she asked HR, and they told her, well, there's an IRS lien because your taxes haven't been paid and the IRS has garnished your salary. And they did that because the husband didn't have a job with a salary. So she spoke to her husband, and he admitted that he owes some tax. It was about $150,000. And he finally agreed that he would pay them, but she wanted a divorce and he wanted to stay married. So we prepared a post-nuptial agreement, which means she was staying married, but he agreed in the event they got a divorce, he would pay the taxes. So again, we're dealing with someone who's a narcissist and thinks only of themselves first, and he had other problems. He had a gambling addiction. She found out on the way home he would go into a sports bar and gamble. So this was not litigated, and eventually, when she was ready, she did ask for a divorce, and her postnuptial agreement allowed her to get the taxes, which he had promised to pay, and the rest of the package: child support, custody. uh, he would have to pay her back for the money that the IRS had garnished, a nice property settlement, and spousal support. So that's how it goes, and that's how you can stay out of court. And I have developed a personality quiz, which it will be in a follow-up email, and you can go on there and answer the questions, and I will answer you and tell you about the traits of your spouse that you're dealing with. You can, of course, see our website at divorcelawyernewyork.com for more detailed information about divorce and prenuptial agreements. My existing book can be found on Amazon. My new book can't be found yet because I'm still working on it, but it's going to be about the psychology of divorce. And I'm offering a free consultation until the end of February for people who are listening to this, if that can be of help to you. And you'll see our office number up there, 212-734-1551. And I hope this has helped and made this a little more understandable and a little easier for you. And I thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lois. And we had some questions come in, and I'll just remind everyone now, if you have a question, you can email info@savvyladies.org, or you can use the chat box here. And one of the questions we had come in during your presentation is, I'm the one who initiated getting a divorce. Our child is in college, but my husband seems to want to go to court to make my life miserable. I feel helpless. I wonder how I can convince him that mediation is a better option. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So you both want a divorce, and he's saying he doesn't want to do mediation. You can certainly go to a mediator for a consultation, and they will give you some ideas about how to convince him to mediate. Basically, you control the process. Nobody's telling people what to do. You can get what the law gives you. It's a lot less money, like really 1/10 the cost. And it's much faster, and you end up being able to talk to each other when the process is over. So, I think you should ask him at least to try it, go once, find somebody you're comfortable with. and have the mediator invite him and tell him why this would be a good idea. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have is, when it comes to mediation, will all of my financial accounts with my ex be managed during the process?
Well, when you're talking about managing them, I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, what normally goes on should be what normally happens in the family. People shouldn't be moving things around. You both need to disclose what's there, and then you can negotiate about who gets what. So it doesn't go on so long that these things have to be managed. That's what happens when you have lawyers and you're making applications for this, that, and the other thing, and each one takes 2 months, 2 months to decide visitation, 2 months to decide spousal support. So yes, I mean, they should still be handled the way they have been during the marriage, and it may only take 2 months to complete this and get an agreement and decide exactly who gets what from which accounts.
Okay, thank you. Another question kind of related to what you were just talking about. How many mediation sessions does it usually take to get an agreement between a couple?
Well, it's interesting. I find that for some reason it goes very quickly when I'm doing this. I mean, sometimes it's 2 sessions, sometimes it's three. More likely it might be 6 or 8 over a 2 month period. It depends on how far apart the people are and how adamant they are about what they want, and also the skill of the mediator in helping make suggestions about, ways to uh, bring people together when they disagree. So, maybe 2 months, maybe a session every week is kind of standard, but sometimes faster. I've had some that have lasted a year, but they were fighting about major issues, so that's not typical.
All right. Okay, good to know. And I believe this is the last question we have, which is, does mediation legally resolve child custody and visitation?
Absolutely. What it results in is what we call a separation agreement. It's a contract, and you agree in that about everything, including custody and visitation. And so that agreement is a binding contract. It's signed by both people. And then the uncontested divorce papers are prepared, and those go to court. The people usually don't have to, at least not in New York State. And the papers are signed by a judge. And then the agreement that was mediated becomes part of your terms of your divorce. So that's the answer.
Okay. And we did just have another question asking if you could repeat your website for everyone that's listening, please.
Uh, yes, it is Divorce Lawyer NY. So it's one word, Divorce Lawyer NY, one word.com. And it's got a lot of information, so you can take a look at it and, hope it'll help.
Okay, great. And I'll just let everyone know that all of the information here will be emailed to everyone. So we'll send the divorce personality quiz and Lois's website and book link as well. So I want to thank you, Lois, for a really great presentation, and thanks to everyone who asked questions today. And thank you so much.
Well, my pleasure, and I hope this helps people stay out of court. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.